First up, we have Betty. She is one of the sweet volunteers that check in voters with fully digital E-Pollbooks.
I am really looking forward to voting today. Let me grab my ID card.
Oh, that's not necessary. Our poll books provide an up-to-date list of everyone who has shown up across the state thus far, making it impossible for anyone else to get your ballot. All I need is your last name.
Betty, how do you compile a real-time list of who has shown up across the state? Wouldn't you need an internet connection and remote access capability?
Our domination election vendors have assured us that our machines do not hook up to the internet.
Well, that's the start of round one, and Betty starts us off with 3 amazing claims. Use of the E-Pollbooks are safe even without voter ID, there is no internet connection, and no remote access capability. What say you, Professor?
Let's get started.
All right, here we go.
So in the case of the electronic poll books, the legitimate connection to the network is to verify 2 things: that the person presenting themselves to vote is a registered voter and has not already voted in this election.
Dallas County spent $4 million to buy 4,200 of these new electronic polling books from the same company that makes the county's voting machines. While these voting machines aren't connected to the internet, the polling books, which has voters' information, are.
The polling books that we'll be using are fully compatible with our rigorous security system.
What we saw in Dallas was that about 15 minutes before the polls closed, there was no one in line, and the count of people who had checked in started increasing.
They just jumped again.
All the numbers are jumping.
Sitting here, we're doing nothing, and our numbers are just going shoo, shoo, shoo.
I jump on it.
The last time I number.
And the worker noticed that said, "Hey, what's going on here? The number's going up, and we haven't checked in any more voters."
I'm now at 817.
I'm 1,089 now.
I just jumped in 9 times.
There was a command coming into that poll book to say, check in this voter.
Dr. Doherty is correct. Experts are finding dedicated modems that directly connect with the E-Pollbooks to relay real-time data. It's not just Dallas, where E-Pollbooks are being taken over remotely. During a Georgia Senate investigative hearing, a poll worker describes how her poll book was taken over by Dominion Voting.
I understood that the voting system was separated from the world by an air gap, that they're not connected to the internet. What I thought I heard you say is that you were able to contact Dominion, they were able to fix the problem. That indicates to me that somehow they're able to communicate with the device that you have.
Yes, sir, they were. I had to give them permission to take over my poll pad so that they could reprogram it.
CISA teamed with states across the country to implement connectivity to AT&T's FirstNet network. Curiously, just after rampant fraud in Georgia's elections was exposed, AT&T's central office in Nashville, which served the region, was destroyed in a Christmas Day bombing. Finally, if you have a voting convenience center, by law, it has to be hooked to the internet.
Well, let's check in with our audience on Team Domination's claims thus far. Safe even without voter ID? No internet connection? And no remote access capability? All right, a rough start, Betty. It makes you wonder why we're even using electronic poll books.
There is a much more nefarious reason as to why they are being used.
As people are voting, all I really need to know is who's showing up. So the internet-connected poll books tell me that. So if I have access to the voter registration database and those e-poll books, I can model the election. I know how many votes I need to inject.
You see people that are stuffing ballots into drop boxes across your state. Did anyone think to ask, where did that mule get the information to stuff a particular drop box in a particular precinct with a certain number of ballots for a certain candidate? They're not going to these drop boxes blindly. There's a candidate that ran for office in Santa Fe. Her name's Catherine Clark. and she was getting her own copy of poll book data throughout Election Day. Morning, midday, afternoon, until the close of the polls on Election Day. At about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she received a very curiously worded email from the Secretary of State that here is another set of poll book data just for you. And when you look at the digital record, you see that in the county that she ran for office, where over 70% of the ballots were accounted for, that number went to 0 for 12 minutes. Right after receiving an email at 3:27 p.m. In other counties, we saw gains of 20% of the vote in 12 minutes. Catherine Clark wasn't just a candidate on a ballot in Santa Fe, she was also an official of the Democrat Party. She was also a political operative that ran campaigns for other candidates throughout the state of New Mexico, and she was receiving poll book data for all 33 counties. So when you couple that with what you saw in 2000 Mules, it presents a very compelling picture of manipulation.